the Sisters Minor of Mary Immaculate, founded by Mother Maria Elisabetta Patrizzi, August 14th, 1983. There have been allegations of abuse within the convent walls. Former members of the SMMI allege that they faced physical, emotional abuse, strict rules, food restrictions, and they have likened their experience to that of a cult. These are their stories, in their words. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Cult of SMMI. I am your host, Scott Mort. Amazing week. First and foremost, Hopeful Hearts Ministry did an amazing episode on the SMMI. There will be a link to the show down below in the show description. If you're not able to use that link for whatever reason, Hopeful Hearts Ministry on YouTube, the name of the video, Surviving SMMI. They talked to Patricia Budd, who has been on the show before, and they've talked to Mike Kovacs. Absolutely fantastic. Shannon and Tamara, the hosts over there, did an amazing job. My hat's off to them. I strongly suggest, almost to the point of insistence, that you check out that episode. Secondly, Mike and I caught up this week. We recorded our conversation. We've got a ton to talk about coming up. Either next week or the week after, Mike Kovacs returns to the podcast to tell his tale of dealing with both his sister, Teresa Kovacs, and the SMMI. This week, we continue with Georgiana. And, of course, unfortunately, I have to throw this out here. The views and experiences expressed by our podcast guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the host or Sparrow Manor Podcast Network. While we strive to provide a platform for diverse perspectives and engaging conversations, it is important to note that the experiences shared by our guests cannot be independently verified. Listeners should exercise critical thinking and consider these stories as personal anecdotes rather than established facts. There is no way to definitively refute or verify the claims made by our guests. The hosts and the podcast network are not responsible for any statements made by the guests during the course of the show. Listeners are encouraged to form their own judgments and seek additional information if desired. I extend an invitation out to anyone, a current member, a former member of the SMMI, whether you are here to verify the claims or refute the claims, family members, friends. I want to hear your story, and you can reach me at strangepathwaysmail@gmail.com. And now, Georgiana. I want you to walk me through that. You've made the decision that you're going to leave. What's the final straw, and how do you start putting things together that I'm getting out of? And while we're at it, did it ever occur to you that, oh, this is a cult? This is not really a religious order. I'm in a cult, and I have to get out now.
When I went to Italy, that's when I put it together. I mean, I always had a suspicion that we weren't really living the right way as a religious order should. In fact, a lot of sisters that I met in Rome were like, "Oh, yeah, we've heard about your community." And they would say it in a very suspicious tone, or a very apologetic tone. I think a lot of the communities that, were longstanding and, schooling their sisters in Rome regularly for the service of the church, they had heard rumors about us. And whenever they met one of us, they wouldn't associate with us at all. They would just, they might talk to you for a few minutes here or there, just kind of pleasantries, but they wouldn't hang around us. When I went to school while I was in Rome, I was in a whole classroom. We had a whole group of sisters, and they barely would ever acknowledge me. And they knew what community I was from. And sometimes they would just stare at me and they'd talk amongst themselves. And I'm like, I don't quite understand this, but it made sense as I was leaving Rome, because I said, you know what, this is it, I'm done. And I told Mother General that. I said, I'm sorry, but I can't stay. And she's like, well, you can't leave. And I said, well, I can, because it's really up to me whether I stay or whether I go. And she said, well, when I send you back to the United States, you're going to go into counseling. Now, this wasn't Mother Christina. This was Patrizzi. She's like, well, we're just going to send you to counseling. And like Patricia had said, I went to that group of Franciscans there in Connecticut. And I remember the first day I walked in, I sat down, and she said, oh, I'm Sister Mary Elizabeth. And I just chuckled. I said, I won't be telling you nothing. And I said that out loud to her. I will be telling you nothing. Because I know for a fact that whatever I say to you will get back to my Mother General. She's like, oh, no, it won't. We abide by the HIPAA rules and everything. And I'm like, okay. And I would go there and we'd chat about stuff. Nothing of nothing personal about me, though.
Right.
Because I was not going to share anything with this woman. Nothing. I looked at it as my opportunity to go get a chai latte at Dunkin' Donuts. But she was, for 2 years, I went to this sister at that Franciscan community. And it was shortly after I started the counseling, I said, also, I would like a spiritual director that, according to our constitutions and the directory, I'm allowed to have, and canonically I'm allowed to have. So then they supplied, with a confessor, a regular confessor, and a spiritual director, because our confessors we never went to the same priest for too long. Like, you might go for a few months, and then we went to another priest for a few months, and then we went to another priest for a few months. And it never made sense to me until later. I was like, oh, those priests can't tell what we're doing. So, and we might be saying something to them about how things were going in the community. And maybe that priest would have a question for our superior, related, but not directly, something we'd said in confession, because the seal of confession is sacred. But I had the feeling that we were, carted around to different priests because they were becoming aware of what was going on in our community. So I think there was more awareness of the abuse than they ever let on. So I started discerning with the confessor and spiritual director for probably about a year to 14 months maybe. And every time I'd go through everything that was going on and my response to things and what I could do spiritually to try to cope with what was going on. And it was Christmas of 2009, the week before Christmas. Both my spiritual director and my confessor, who are two separate people who did not know that each other were a part of my discernment, both said to me, "It's time to get out, leave now." And I was like, "Oh, wow." Because, that was for us, if we had confirmation like that from a confessor and a spiritual director, then that was straight from God. And I went home that day after talking with my spiritual director, and I said, "Well, Sister Carolyn, I'll be leaving." And she said, "What?" I said, "Well, my spiritual director and my confessor this week said it's time to leave." And she's like, "Well, you can't just walk out." I said, "Oh, no, I'm not just walking out. I'm doing things the canonical, correct way to do it," which I was the first, and I might say the only sister who went through the process the way canon law states it. And so at that point, I was told, "Well, you write this letter." And because, we had no hierarchy at that point, things had spun so wildly out of control that Patrizzi had started yet a third community. She was a hermit, but she had taken a couple of sisters and one of the brothers with her. I used to call it a hermit with staff. And she, well, because she had a driver, a doctor, a secretary, a nurse, and I don't know, a cook. And then she had the brother there for mass and confession. She had everything she needed right there. But they weren't hermits. They were supposed to be, part of a community. In other words, she was never supposed to have taken people out of either of the communities she founded to a hermitage. But it was usually a comedy of errors, as I noticed when things were dissembling. But Sister Christina had stepped down and stepped away, and Sister Mary Elizabeth, and then the Council Sisters. So I wrote this letter to what was called Commissioner. There was just this sister from another community that was just trying to mitigate the disaster and help us figure out where to go and what to do next. So I got confirmation from that letter on February 24th of 2010, which was my grandma Barrett's birthday. And then I left on March 30th of 2010. And it was like a death, because I had anticipated being in religious life till I died. And here I am driving away without a habit on. And because I think they gave me, I don't know, like $40 to go out and get a pair of shoes, a pair of pants, and a shirt so I could leave. Because, you couldn't take the habit with you, obviously, and I wouldn't have wanted to.
Right.
But it was like, although the funny thing is, all the sisters that did escape, well, no, I shouldn't say all, most of the sisters that escaped just mailed the habit back. Some of them just left it there, and somebody had gotten them clothes somehow, which, again, it's that whole, oh, you can't be talking to people, and you can't be sharing, and you can't this, and you can't, and heaven forbid you share anything that happens actually within the community. But it was interesting. I felt free. I had, from the time I had taken my final vows in 2000 until that day that I signed my indult, which was the Vatican excusing me from vows, I had migraines, horrible cluster migraines from right after my final vows until the day I signed that paper. I haven't had a migraine since.
That's
That,
yeah, that speaks volumes.
yeah. So, while it was very difficult and like a death, um, I finally felt that I could do what God wanted me to do. I knew that He still wanted me to be His, and I'm still looking for that place that I'm supposed to be. But I know I'm where I'm supposed to be right now. Like, for instance, being here with my cousins, I am helping them in a lot of different ways that they never anticipated needing help in. But they're like, we're so glad you're here. We count on you so much. But, God puts you where you're supposed to be. And again, I stayed because I love Jesus. I wanted to be His forever. I wanted to be a sister and, work for the church and the people of God. And when I came home, Jesus just wanted me to heal. And I kept trying to force things. And I realized after that He'd never intended for any of us to suffer a lot of what we suffered in the convent. There was no rhyme or reason to it. It was just at the whim of a person who had their own issues and then painted the situation with their mental state, and the outcome was whatever mental state they were in, whether they were angry or sad, or you got punished in whatever way it was. Like, you won't be with community for a while, or you won't be able to do this, that, or the other thing, or you're going to go in the chapel for X amount of hours and kneel down and ask Jesus to straighten you out. And I would always take the Jesus straightening me out. I'm like, yeah, I'll go to the chapel. That works. I'll be in there until you need me. And sometimes I go in there and I'd be in there till it was time to go to bed. So many things were so peculiar from towards the end. It was a struggle, but I knew I had to get out the right way. I knew that I couldn't live with myself if I just walked away, because I went because I knew I had a vocation. And trying to walk away from that, to me, was the worst thing that could possibly ever happen.
I'm always astounded with each one of the former sisters that I speak to. Their faith doesn't really seem to be damaged by this.
No.
I don't think I've spoken, and I've spoken to a few people that I haven't been on record with yet. Some people don't know if they want to be on record at all.
Right.
But the one thing that surprises me, nobody came out of this saying, "I don't believe in God." No, God wouldn't let this happen. Not one person has said that to me, and to me, that's kind of astounding.
Well, it's kind of like I was in Trumbull, Connecticut, when the whole cover up of the abuses came to light. And I was in a parish where two priests and the janitor of the school had been inappropriate with a number of young men. And I remember people coming to me and saying, "Sister, what is going on?" I said, here's the thing. Well, it shakes our faith to think that a priest or someone working for the church could do such a thing. it's not about them. It's about your relationship with God. I mean, you'll have people that are aggravating and mean and cruel all your life. There's always going to be somebody doing something that you know they shouldn't be doing, they know they shouldn't be doing. But just because somebody else sins doesn't mean you shouldn't love God and that you shouldn't trust God. That's between them and God. And that was the only thing that kept me sane for all of my life. Just because somebody hurts me or just because bad things happen, it doesn't mean God wishes ill for us. It's a matter of, think of all the things that, other people go through. And you're like, well, yeah, well, that's not as bad as what's happening to me isn't as bad as that. Like I've got a number of friends who have, very ill family members. And I think, wow, that's a lot to go through. And I've been through it myself. But you don't say, well, God, why did you cause this? Well, he doesn't cause any of it. He doesn't cause sin. That's ours. He tries to get us out of it. So I couldn't hold on to that and hold it against God, because he gave us free will for a reason. We make our own choices. We do basically what we want, when we want, how we want, unless we're asking God constantly, what would you like me to do? And I'm pretty sure the stuff that happened while I was in the convent weren't God's will. They weren't things he wanted to have happen, but they happened anyway. And, it's everything in life. The things that happen, you have to make a decision. Do you just hold on to it and let it make you bitter or sad or destroy you? Or do you pick I'm going to start over? And I think, as far as I know, all of the sisters who left of their own volition in whatever way possible, I think that's how they saw it in the end. Maybe at first they were angry, or they were didn't want anything to do with other religious or anything to do with church for a while, other than going to mass. But eventually, I'm sure most of them have come around to the fact that what happened to us, has happened to other sisters in other communities to a greater or lesser degree, isn't the church's fault, isn't God's fault. And I say church in the wider sense of the teachings, rather than like bishops covering up abuses. That was horrifying to all of us. I can still remember a lot of the things that people would ask me, why this and why that? How can we ever trust priests again? I'm like, well, Father so-and-so. Well, yeah. Do you think he would ever do that? Well, I don't know. We didn't even think the other priests would do it. I said, well, sin is a personal choice, just like doing a good thing is a personal choice. It's not God's fault when people make tremendously inappropriate, incorrect, harmful, hateful decisions. So in the end, yeah, I couldn't hold God responsible for their bad behavior.
Thank you for joining us once again here on the Cult of SMMI. If you, a family member, a friend, were a member of the SMMI and would like to tell your tale, please reach out to me, strangepathwaysmail@gmail.com. Thank you so much for joining us here this week. Take care of yourselves and each other.